Dreamweaver, Chapter 14, Terrenton. Isaac lay on the beach, watching the waves inch their way ashore, only to fall back into the tumultuous ocean. He had fallen asleep twice already, and feeling guilty for his lapse in duty, decided to patrol the area. With a pair of binoculars and a walking stick, Isaac doubted his ability to intimidate any trespassers. If anything were to happen, his greatest value-added activity was to run. Fortunately, he had never encountered anyone on this isolated stretch of land. For one thing, he was facing the south, while most of the trouble came from the north. Often he imagined how he would handle the situation should something were to happen. Hide and detail the trespassers, tempt luck and turn them back by himself. His favorite was to haul the intruders to town. Paul did that once to a band of marauders, and since then was hailed as the protector of maidenhood and upholder of justice. Isaac wondered ironically how many girls Paul had bedded with that fame alone. It would most certainly be nice, but nowhere near as pleasant as patrolling the south, he corrected with a smile. Life was simple, and this was how he preferred. Heroes had too many responsibilities and were under far too much scrutiny. He would rather have privacy over fame. Often, however, as his late mother had said, fate casts an envious eye on the happy and the contented. Isaac was both. And today, fate sent its messenger, appearing as a black speck on the horizon, but large enough to send Isaac grabbing for the binoculars. At first, Isaac was unsure of his sight. It was not unusual for him to see mirages on his lonely patrols. As the image grew in size, he began to make out the details. Two things immediately struck him. First, the man was unarmed. The sword in the man's hand hardly counted when compared to modern weaponry. Most curiously, however, was what the man appeared to carry on his back. Isaac rubbed his eyes and looked again. It wasn't a trick of the light or his imagination. The man was carrying a woman. She was Blanche, with eyes closed and limbs dangling. She would have fallen if not for the harness that tied her to the man. From what Isaac could make out, she was nothing more than a cadaver. He was stunned. What lunacy is this? The man did not look dangerous, but he was definitely mad. Why did he pass through here? Is he a decoy? Isaac's heart thumped loudly as adrenaline flooded his arteries. He only had this one job, and no matter how mediocre and unglamorous it was, he promised his mother he would do it well. This was the nature of his task, an eternity of boredom punctuated by moments of dread. That moment had arrived, and Isaac was determined to do his job. Priscilla was the village head in name only. She conducted the meetings and held ceremonies as a titular figure, but nothing more. Even the deference awarded her was a mockery of the real power bestowed upon her late father and on old Sam, the village elder and de facto chief. Terrenton was an isolated place. To the east were deserts, to the north and south were endless sandy beaches, and to the west the vast ocean. No one came after the ashes except to seek their submission, and no one ever succeeded. There was a certain level of pride in their independence, but nothing came without a price. Her father died for the village, and now she was bound by it. As she sat waiting for the rest of the elders to arrive, Priscilla wondered whether they were truly free or was worship of Dominicans another form of bondage. She was wavering over the issue when Isaac barged into the town hall. Sweat poured down his face, and he panted heavily. In between breaths, he ranted inaudible words. By his look alone, she knew there was trouble, and immediately gathered her hunting bow and quiver of arrows. She ran into Philip and quickly sent him to round up the men and alert the villagers while she headed toward the beach with Isaac. They waited behind a large boulder. By now, Isaac was wheezing uncontrollably. This certainly wasn't one of his typical days, she thought, and grinned at the dry humor. Should we move on ahead? Isaac asked, practically breathing the words through his throat. No, she replied. The narrow passage here gives us the best defensive position, and we'll be even better fortified once the others arrive. We just have to be patient. Isaac didn't bother replying. He nodded and leaned against the rocks, swallowing hard. Priscilla thought about sending him back, but quickly decided against it should the man not show. She would need Isaac to lead the search. The loud clanging of weaponry temporarily took her attention off the beach. The men neared, and she signaled for them to approach more stealthily. They fell to their stomachs and crawled to the boulders surrounding the narrow shoreline. "Where is he?" Philip asked. She shook her head. "Nothing ever happens in the south, not since the world ended," Philip said accusatorily. Priscilla pointed an arrow to Philip's neck. "A mortal blow is only a hit, but you won't ever recover. That's why we are here." "I swear by what I saw," Isaac replied just as adamantly. "Look," someone whispered, but loud enough for Priscilla to hear. She reached for Isaac's binoculars and saw a man approach. He was just as Isaac described, armed with nothing but a sword and carried a woman on his back. She was dumbfounded and looked a little past him to see if there were others lying in ambush. She saw no one else. "Have the men divide into 2 groups," she said to Philip. "One will remain here in case of a surprise attack. The other will follow me down to the pass once this man nears." They didn't wait long. The man moved a lot faster than she had expected despite his load. At about 15 feet from the boulders, she stopped him with an arrow planted firmly at his feet. He looked up, surprised but not scared. "I am Priscilla, the village head of Terrenton. Identify yourself and your purpose for coming here." "My name is Ainsley. I am merely seeking passage." "Passage?" She eyed him suspiciously. "Passage where?" "North," he replied. She couldn't read him. He appeared genuine, and his expression showed impatience even, but his presence was far from normal, let alone the strange request to reach the northern lands. "You're lying," Philip spat. "North is Marauder territory. Why would anyone want to go there? Speak the truth, or don't ever speak again." "I have said what I will. Either way, I'm going to ask you to let me pass." His tone was polite but determined. "Why do you want to go north?" Priscilla asked. He glanced at the girl behind him. "I need to find a cure for her, or she'll die." "She's already dead," Philip remarked, but quickly kept silent when Ainsley glowered at him. "May I?" Priscilla asked, lowering her bow. She ignored Philip's tug on her arm and approached Ainsley after he gave her a permissive nod. The girl felt cold to the touch, and initially Priscilla thought Philip was correct in his pronouncement. But the girl's skin was still soft, and though she couldn't be certain, Priscilla thought she detected a slight movement of the girl's eyes under her eyelids. She glanced confusedly at her men. The story was so strange that it might be true. If so, she didn't want to see bloodshed for naught. "We should take him in and let the elders decide his fate," Philip said. Ainsley looked hesitant, and his eyes slowly passed from man to man. "He's ready in for a fight," Priscilla thought. Although they outnumbered him 20-1, there was something unnerving about Ainsley's confident stare. Her instincts told her to avoid the confrontation. Priscilla held out her hands and stepped between Ainsley and her own people. "By your looks, you have traveled a long way. The water pouch is almost empty, and I don't know how much farther you have to go, but you won't last. Neither will she." Sweat turned the lines in her palms into rivers. Her heart raced, and she could hear the turbulence of each nervous breath. She almost jumped when he spoke. "What are you suggesting?" She looked at Philip and the others, and then back at Ainsley. "We have fresh water and a horse and wagon. We don't mean any harm, but if anything, we would like to know more about the outside. I promise you'll be more than made up for the lost time with fresher legs and new supplies." Everyone waited anxiously for Ainsley's decision. He didn't glance at the men. Instead, he looked over his shoulder at the comatose girl, as if assessing or conferring with her. "All right," he finally said. Several of the men came forward, and she quickly ordered them back. "I'll escort him," she said, and smiled at Ainsley. "The 2 of you are our guests." Surprisingly, he smiled in return. Mervyn was tapping his foot impatiently. News of an outsider had spread throughout the village. So did rumors of the man's interest in cargo. Some called it necrophilia, while others decried it as outright necromancy. Now this man was being invited into town. The village head certainly had a lot to explain during this meeting. Old Sam appeared in deep thought as well, but he was unlike Joe and Petite. Those two spilled their brains like they did their piss. This incident wasn't to their liking already, and they felt that killing the stranger would have saved everyone the trouble. But old Sam, what is inside his head? The doors of the town hall swung open, and many of the villagers had already gathered outside. A low rumble moved through the throng as they parted to allow Priscilla entrance. Two of Philip's boys closed the door after him. They all stood. It was old Sam who spoke first. "Ah, my dear child, we are curious about the stranger." "A deranged madman is more like it," Joe blurted. "Didn't I call it? The world outside has gone kooky." "I second that," Petite said. "Ain't no use keeping him. Suppose he goes unhinged and kills everyone." "He's not going to kill anyone," Priscilla reassured. She sat, and they all joined her at the table. "I have arranged for him to meet you gentlemen tomorrow." "What is there to talk about?" Joe complained. "I'm sure there's much we can gain from it," Sam said, backing Priscilla in a surprising move. Mervyn watched him closely, still trying to ascertain the old man's motives. "Well, you've said it," Joe answered, crossing his hands behind his head. "What say you, Mervyn?" Sam asked. "Yeah, you old fart," Petite said crudely. "You old fox," Mervyn thought as he looked at Sam. "I'm of the same opinion as Sam and Priscilla." "Then it's settled. There's no use fretting over something when we'll know more tomorrow," Priscilla said with relief, though short-lived. The next agenda was equally vexing. "About the Minikins, the festival is in 2 days, and we haven't decided." She had used the same word every year, decide. There was nothing to decide. Since the world changed, Terrenton adopted a new tradition. The only decision afforded was which family had to draw lots. Not even the village chief's family was spared from this custom. "Well, according to the list of those who have drawn," Petite proffered, "half of Terrenton's family are still eligible." "Including mine," old Sam added. "So eager already?" Joe snorted. "Only to be fair," the old fox replied, smiling calmly as if drawn were for a raffle. "I don't see why we visit this topic every year," Mervyn interjected. "We can continue with the random drawings as we have always done." "I'd rather not," Priscilla retorted. The room went silent. "What was that?" Petite asked in disbelief. "Every year we visit this topic because it's always pushed aside. If the world's overrun by goons or some abomination, how do you explain the traveler? Minikins keep us safe, but they also make taxing demands," Priscilla replied sternly, holding each of their eyes in turn. "Child, you're still young," old Sam said in an overbearing, patriarchal manner. "Youth doesn't preclude me to logic." "You take this village head position far too seriously," Joe said calmly. His perpetual scowl had curiously mutated into a wry grin, perhaps because of the unfolding drama. "I take the lives of my people seriously," Priscilla replied, and Joe shrugged nonchalantly. She was visibly upset, and he had done his part to fan the fire. "Listen to what you are saying," Mervyn hissed. He didn't like the old fox, but the impetuousness of youth irked him infinitely more. "Without the Minikins, we would all be dead." "We did what we could to survive because we didn't have a choice. Now we do," Priscilla urged. "What choice?" Petite asked. Priscilla ignored the rhetorical nature of the question and answered anyway. "To leave. Ainsley survived. He's from the outside, so there must be a way. If there is, he would not be here carrying the dead." Joe added, then smiled impishly. "We don't even know what's out there save those things," Petite said. For the elders, the memories of those hairy cyclopean beasts running amok and hunting humans were still fresh in their minds. "And you think this situation is sustainable? Look at the children. Look at our population. Look at how many people have died since. In another 50, 80, 100 years, and there won't be anyone left," Priscilla countered. Old Sam put his hands on her shoulders in a consolatory gesture, but she shrugged away. "If we postpone voting, we would need to give the people a proper explanation," Sam suggested, seemingly persuaded by Priscilla's words, if not emotions. "I'll handle that," she said. Joe shrugged and gave his usual half-hearted support. Petite followed with an equivocal remark that would allow him to shift blame or take credit depending on the outcome. Mervyn was firmly against the proposal, but saw little to gain from opposing momentum and issued an equally ambiguous, "Do what you will." Old Sam smiled as if the triumph was his and turned to Priscilla. "There you have it, a successful meeting by any measure." I hope you enjoyed the story so far. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot to me, as I'm a one-man show when it comes to writing, editing, and producing the audiobook, complete with sound effects and music. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.